Have you ever contradicted yourself? The moment you did the exact thing you said you would never do. Did you freeze, or did you just keep going? Maybe the biggest lie is not the one we tell others. Maybe it's the one we tell ourselves. Maybe the most dangerous blindness is not the blindness of a bad person, but the blindness of a good one. That is what this story is about. There was a man, brave, loyal, one of the first to leap. When everyone else was retreating, he was still there, or at least that's what he believed. That night, a fire was burning, strangers surrounded him, and someone turned to him and asked, "Weren't you with him?" The answer was simple, short, final. "I don't know him." Then again, then once more, 3 times, and the rooster crowed. This is not a story about betrayal. This is the story of a man who thought he knew himself better than anyone, and then, in the moment of crisis, discovered he didn't know himself at all. Peter didn't only deny Jesus, he denied himself. And maybe you, at least once in your life, have done exactly the same thing. To understand Peter, you have to walk with him. He was a fisherman from Capernaum, rough hands, a loud voice, fast decisions. The kind of man that when he spoke, people listened. When he moved, people watched. He wasn't graceful, he was solid. He wasn't thoughtful, he was decisive. And that was his greatest strength, and at the same time, his greatest vulnerability. Jesus had chosen him as one of his first disciples. "You are Peter, the rock." Those words had been spoken directly to him, not just a name, an identity. And Peter carried that identity on his shoulders in every step. A rock stands firm. A rock doesn't retreat. A rock doesn't crack. A rock doesn't deny. That night at the Last Supper, Jesus had said, "All of you will fall away because of me tonight." Into the silence of the room, Peter's voice rose above everyone else's. "Even if everyone falls away, I never will." He wasn't lying when he said it. He genuinely believed it. It came from the depths of his heart, from his bones. The problem was this: the heart doesn't always say the same thing under every condition. Jesus turned to him specifically that night. "I tell you the truth, Peter. Before the rooster crows tonight, you will deny me 3 times. Peter objected, maybe with a little anger, maybe with a little hurt. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." The man who said those words didn't seem to be lying, but the hour was still before midnight. There were a few hours left until morning. They went to Gethsemane. Jesus prayed. The disciples slept. Peter slept too. His sword was at his side, but he had failed to keep watch. Then the torches came. the soldiers came, and Peter woke up, drew his sword, and cut off an ear. He was ready to fight. Fighting is easy, but Jesus stopped him. Put it away, and Peter's action was no longer needed. He only had to stay silent, and staying silent is sometimes far harder than fighting. They bound Jesus and took him away. Peter followed from a distance. He was still there. He still hadn't let go. That alone required courage. The others had fled. Peter stayed. But there is a fine line between staying and standing. And that line was waiting for him that night. The courtyard was cold. The night had deepened. The air had sharpened. A few servants and guards had lit a fire in the center. The orange glow of burning charcoal struck the stone walls. Shadows swayed. Peter stepped in among them, like a stranger, like someone no one knew, or at least hoping to be. Inside, there was an interrogation. Outside, only waiting. The heat of the fire warmed the hands, but not the inside. Peter sat down, fixed his eyes on the flames. Maybe he was trying to catch a glimpse of Jesus through the window inside. Maybe he was trying not to. Sometimes the thing we fear most is looking into the eyes of someone we love, because in that gaze we see ourselves. There was a servant girl, young, curious, observant. She looked at Peter's face, looked long, a look of recognition. Weren't you with him too, with Jesus the Galilean? It was a small question, ordinary. But for Peter, that question was like a blade, silent, thin, cutting straight to the heart. The answer came fast. I don't know him. I don't even know what you're talking about. The first denial passed just like that. Quick, almost automatic. Maybe he hadn't even thought about it in that moment. Maybe fear had struck so suddenly that the tongue moved before the mind could engage. A defense reflex turned into habit, the instinct to survive. Someone who has never known fear cannot understand this mechanism. But everyone has stood at the threshold of this door at least once. He pulled back toward the gate of the courtyard, as if putting a little distance would let the danger pass. But another girl saw him there. She turned to those around her. This man was one of them too. And Peter denied it again. This time maybe a little harder, because saying it a second time meant confirming the first. The way back grew longer with every denial. Those nearby moved closer. Someone else spoke. You're definitely one of them. Your accent gives you away. You're a Galilean. This was no longer a small question. This was an accusation. And Peter swore. He called down curses. I don't know this man. The words that left his mouth fell onto the stones, burned in the firelight. And at that exact moment, the rooster crowed. 3 denials, each one different, but all passing through the same door. The first was a reflex. The second was a confirmation. The third was a hardening. Each one carried the weight of the one before it, and each one pulled Peter a little further from himself. Analyze the first denial. A young girl asks, no danger, no weapon, no court, just a question of curiosity. But Peter said, I don't know him. Why? Because fear is not proportional to the size of the threat. Fear is the moment you are caught unprepared. And Peter that night was not truly prepared. He had his sword, but his heart had already been shaken. The second denial was a quieter thing. After the first had been spoken, there was no longer any reason to step back. Because denial itself builds a prison. Once you say it, you feel compelled to be consistent with what you said. To say, no, I was wrong, I actually do know him, would mean both admitting the denial and stepping into danger. Peter was trapped inside his own words. The third was the heaviest, because he swore. He called down curses. This was no longer just saying, I don't know. This was saying it in the name of God. I don't know, and placing everything on top of those words, as if he were sealing not his faith, but his denial. Words can weigh this much. Sometimes a single sentence carries a person very far from themselves. So where did Peter's I never will resolve end? Not in one definitive moment. It faded gradually. In the first denial, a small flame flickered. In the second, it nearly went out. By the third, not even an ember remained. This shows how moral collapse generally works, not in one great moment of evil, but through the accumulation of small surrenders. Once saying it becomes easy, the second time comes easier still. The rooster crowed. Why does this sound matter so much? Because Jesus had said it beforehand. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And now the rooster had crowed. This was not coincidence. This was a reminder. A moment placed inside time. A moment Peter could not escape. It was as if the universe had crowed that sound specifically for him. And at that exact moment, Luke recorded it. Jesus turned from inside. He looked at Peter. Just looked. No words, no accusation, no anger. Just a gaze. And what did Peter see in that gaze? Maybe not, I told you so. Maybe it was more like, I still know you. This is the heaviest form of love, to look not with disappointment, but with understanding. Peter went outside, and he wept bitterly. In the original language, 2 words, but those 2 words carry that entire night. Was this weeping remorse, shame, breaking? Maybe all of it, maybe none of it. Maybe it was simply the weeping of a man who could finally see. Jesus was crucified. Peter was not there. Consider the weight of that. The most loyal disciple at the most critical moment was absent. John was there. Mary Magdalene was there, but not Peter. And that absence was perhaps the most painful answer to what had happened that night. He hadn't run away, but he couldn't bring himself to return either. 3 days passed. The news of the resurrection came. The women ran and told it, and Peter, what did he do? He ran. He ran to the tomb. He bent down and looked inside, saw the linen strips, saw the burial cloth. It was empty, and he went back home, wondering what had happened. He still hadn't understood. It still hadn't processed, because some truths cannot enter until you are ready. A morning on the shore of the sea, they had gone back to fishing, as if everything was pulling back toward the old life. There was morning mist, the boat was heavy, they had caught nothing. A voice came from the shore, "Throw your net on the right side." They threw it, the net filled. And John turned and said, "It is the Lord." What did Peter do? He jumped out. He swam. He ran. He threw not his sword, but himself into the water, because this time he didn't want to escape. He wanted to reach. On the shore, a fire was burning. Charcoal, fish, and bread. Jesus was waiting, and Peter came, soaking wet, breathless, perhaps still carrying that night in his heart. Did he remember that other fire from 2 weeks before? That fire in the courtyard on that cold night where he had spoken his denial. Now there was a different fire. And beside this fire, a different question would be asked. "Peter, do you love me?" Jesus asked. It was a simple question, but it carried everything inside it. Peter answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." He asked again. Peter answered again. He said it again. 3 questions, 3 answers, 3 commissions. And Peter felt something bitterly, because he knew why the question was being asked 3 times. 3 denials, 3 affirmations. This was not coincidence. This was a restoration ritual. Jesus touched Peter's wound exactly 3 times, once for each denial, and closed it. He didn't punish him. He didn't shame him. He only asked. He only waited. And with every "yes, I love you," he took back a piece of what had been lost that night. This is the quietest and most powerful form of forgiveness. Now consider this. Peter carried that night. But what he carried didn't continue to crush him. It transformed him. Because a person who knows the weight of denial looks differently at someone else's weakness. Not as someone who watches another fall, but as someone who has fallen and risen. That pain didn't make him less of a man. It made him a more real one. In the rest of the gospel record, Peter speaks, and he is no longer the man who said, "I never will." At Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came, he stood up and addressed tens of thousands. That speech begins, "Listen to this, fellow Israelites." He was fearless. But now that courage didn't come from confidence in his own strength. It was the courage of a man who knew himself, the courage of someone who had fallen and risen anyway. When the Romans captured him, they wanted him crucified, like Jesus. Peter agreed. But he asked for one difference. He wanted to be crucified upside down. Why? I am not worthy to die the same way as Jesus, he said. Where did that humility come from? From that courtyard, from that fire, from that rooster's crow. The rock stood more firmly now, precisely because it knew it had cracked. Peter's story says this: the greatest fall can be the ground of the greatest transformation, but it's not automatic, because Judas also betrayed. Differently, but he had. Judas felt remorse but couldn't come back. Peter felt remorse and came back. What was the difference? Maybe the eyes, maybe that gaze. Peter saw in Jesus' eyes not condemnation, but a call. Now I want to ask you this: who was really sitting at that courtyard fire? Only Peter? Or have you too sat at that fire, waiting, hiding, about to say, I don't know him? Because this story ended 2,000 years ago. But that courtyard was never closed. That fire was never put out. It's still burning, and someone is still asking, aren't you one of them? And that moment, the moment you freeze, pull back, go silent, that is Peter's moment. The one thing he shares with you, he had frozen there too. He had pulled back too. But in the end, Jesus was waiting on the shore with his question, his fire, his bread. Is he waiting for you too? I don't know, but I know this. Peter ran, he swam, he went. Are you one of them? The question is still waiting for an answer. And this time, you don't have to deny it. Peter didn't have to either, but he did. And out of that denial, the rock emerged. How? Because fire doesn't melt rock. It purifies it. Think about today. How many people have said, I would never become that kind of person, and became exactly that person? How many have said, I will never give up in a relationship, a career, a belief, and quietly walked away? This is not a common weakness. This is the most universal human experience. What makes Peter ordinary is not the denial, it's the overconfidence that came before it. Modern psychology calls this the overconfidence bias. People deceive themselves most in the very areas where they feel strongest, where they say, I'm good at this won't affect me. That's exactly where they are most vulnerable. Peter was precisely that. He fell from the point he thought was his strongest. And you too, most likely, have stumbled from the place where you felt most certain. Social pressure. Today we give it different names, but the mechanism is the same. In a meeting room, everyone is nodding, so you nod too, but you don't believe it. Someone says something wrong, you laugh along, but something inside you burns. For Peter, saying I'm with him was dangerous. For you, it might just be awkward, uncomfortable, costly. But you go silent anyway. This is the modern courtyard. Or think of this. When you choose something that benefits you but conflicts with your values, what do you feel? Just this once, you say. Under these circumstances, it's okay, you say. Everyone does it, you say. Peter probably rationalized it exactly like that in that moment. Just one night, just this one question, just this little bit. And once you say it, the second time becomes easier. By the third, you're taking oaths. But here is where the hope lives. Peter's story doesn't end with the denial. It doesn't end with the weeping either. It doesn't end with the rooster's crow. At that shore, at that fire, it continues. And that says something profound. Change is possible. But what kind of change? Peter was no longer saying, "I never will." He was saying, "You know." This is the passage from false confidence to real humility. And that passage most often goes through a fall. Look at your own life. Where did you fall? At which fire did you deny a value, a relationship, a belief, a promise? And where did that fall take you? Toward running away like Judas, or toward weeping and returning like Peter? Both are human responses, but one is an ending, the other a beginning. The choice is usually made after the weeping. The lesson from Peter is this: before you use the word never about yourself, pause. Because the perfect opportunity to contradict yourself may not have arrived yet. And when it comes, you won't be alone in that courtyard. Everyone has been there. Peter went there. But on the shore, in the morning mist, someone was waiting for him, asking a question, still asking. Did the rooster's crow wake you too? In your own courtyard, at your own fire, in the middle of your own denial, did a sound come? It wasn't there to condemn you. It was there to remind you. Aren't you one of them? Is not an accusation. It's an invitation. And you don't have to answer it right now, but you will have to answer it eventually. Peter ran, he swam, he went. The door is still open. If this story touched something in you, share it. Maybe someone you know is sitting in that courtyard right now, feeling the cold, about to say, "I don't know him." Maybe they need to hear this. Falling is not the end. The rock stands more firmly because it knows it has cracked.